Gosh, I'm so nervous at the same time. Okay. Welcome to Fairy Podmother. I am your host, Jadea Kelly. Today I'm speaking with my first ever podcast guest. My goal for this year was to interview everyone involved in my upcoming album, Weather Girl, and who better to rip the Band-Aid off than the man who named me Weather Girl, but the amazing Ryan O'Reilly. Ryan, welcome to Fairy Podmother.
Thank you very much, Jada. Thanks for having me.
So before we begin, I prepared a short bio for you.
Okay.
It's part fiction, part Wikipedia, part I called all of your past lovers.
Oh, is this like two truths and a lie kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay. I have to guess.
Yeah, guess which part I made up.
Of my own life. Yeah.
Okay, so Ryan, John, Campbell, Patrick O'Reilly.
That is my name,
Those
yes.
are 3 middle names.
So, yeah, in case I've lost one.
Yes. Born April 17th, 1792.
Yep.
In Oxford, UK, to Robert and Charmaine O'Reilly.
That's all
correct.
factual, yeah.
I spoke to your mom in preparation
Okay.
for this interview, and she said that on month 8 of your gestation, she heard in her womb, without hesitation, you sell your soul to Lucifer himself.
Yeah, she might. That is the type of thing my mum would say. She's from Northern Ireland, so they do just say quite bleak, dark things at random intervals. So, yeah, that all
correct.
sounds
That
pretty,
happened.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, Ryan has released 3 full-length albums, all of which I love. He has toured as support for the likes of Lissy and the Arkells. He's shared the stage with Anais Mitchell, and he also recently had his music placed in the new Dr. Jekyll film. Ryan built a dedicated following in Europe through busking on Portobello Road, to the point where when I opened for him in Europe, there are droves of fans reciting every single one of his lyrics.
Oh, that's very nice.
Yes.
For you to remember the nice things about me.
But before we jump in, I have some rapid-fire questioning.
Okay.
Just to loosen you into your
I'm
podcast.
pretty-
Is this your first podcast ever, or?
I feel like, because I'm a man, I'm a white man in my 30s, I feel like podcasting comes very naturally.
Oh, yes.
So I probably dream about podcasting. This is something that actually is a bit like doing cocaine. I've tried to avoid doing it because I know how addictive it will be to hear the sound of my own mellifluous voice saying wonderful, smart, witty, funny things.
Okay.
So even though it is my first podcast, I feel like I was born to do this.
Okay. You're settling in nicely. Well, that's my first question of the rapid-fire questions. How do you feel about being my first podcast guest? Only one-word answers, please.
Great.
What I was hoping you would say. Number 2, who's your favorite songwriter of all time?
Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan. What's your favorite color?
Green.
Green. I thought you were going to say black, but...
Oh, is it? I can get it wrong.
Yeah, I have my answers. Wrong. Get out of here. Who's your first kiss?
Next door neighbor.
She remains nameless.
His name was Norman.
Norman, if you're listening,
Yeah.
Ryan would like to reconnect.
Yeah, no, Norman's granddaughter Laura was my first kiss.
Oh, okay. What's the first song you ever wrote?
It was called Last Year's Blues, and I wanted to sound like Bob Dylan. Oh, sorry, this is the rapid fire. Last Year's Blues.
Okay. You don't have to give just one word.
You can't set the rules and then break the rules immediately.
You're breaking the rules and you're giving the wrong answers so far. What is the current book you're reading?
My Family and Other Animals. I forget the author's name. I've almost finished it. It's beautiful. Again, this is rapid fire.
Yeah.
My Family and Other Animals.
Okay. Okay, finally, why am I Weather Girl?
Because you get debilitating migraines at the drop of pressure in the atmosphere.
Very good. Okay. So, Ryan and I have been in each other's orbit for probably 20 years.
You're aging us a little bit.
I know,
Yeah.
but...
2 years. We're both teenagers.
We're still teenagers currently. Mentally. So we've been in each other's orbit for about 20 years, oddly through the Toronto open mic scene. So I would like to know what brought Ryan O'Reilly to Toronto from the UK when he was 18.
Well, when I was about 15 and 16, I started getting very into reading these kind of narratives of people traveling across like the great North American continent. So Bound for Glory by Woody Guthrie, his autobiography. And then I read On the Road, Jack Kerouac's On the Road, and I knew I didn't want to go to university. I'd sort of had drifted away from thinking about academia or anything, and I knew I wanted to be a songwriter. I was obsessed with Bob Dylan. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go to America, I'm going to jump on a freight train, and I'm going to go across the country and have all these adventures. I'm sure lots of other people have had that sort of similar fantasy. And my mum said, well, they electrify the lines now, and, it's not the old freight trains of the 1950s. You'll probably get shot and you've got no money. But you have a great uncle that lives in Etobicoke in Toronto, and my mum had only met him once, and he and his family said that I could stay in the basement for the summer into the autumn. So I went to Toronto, and the first month I was there, I kind of didn't know what I was doing in the suburbs. Suburbs in North America are so much bigger than what I was used to, so I was way out. But eventually I found my way into downtown Toronto, found the open mic scene. I was only 18, so I wasn't supposed to be in the bars. So every time I got served a beer, I thought, well, they think I'm 19, so I better stay in this bar and drink myself stupid, because this could be the last beer I have in Canada. So, that was going to Canada.
Interesting. And so I think at the same time I was doing that open mic scene, but we never officially met. But that's when you first connected with Tyler Kite, who eventually became one of your most cherished buds.
Cherished buds. I don't know, that's the way we describe each other, but... Decent mate.
Who you've done most of your
good
songwriting
pal,
with.
Songwriting buddy. Yep, met Tyler. He was in an interesting part of chapter in his life, doing lots of acting, and he was doing his solo music, and was just a little bit older than me, and very confident, and had experienced lots of things that I hadn't. In music and in life, and it was a good sort of way to spend your 18th summer, to and we started writing very quickly. So I've always been drawn to co-writing because of that experience in Toronto in 2004 with Tyler. Yeah,
I think that's what also drew me to the open mic scene in Toronto. I just needed some type of artistic outlet, because I also grew up in the suburbs. Like an hour outside. So yeah, meeting Tyler and meeting everybody who people that had decided they were songwriters. It was like where I grew up in my town, I had made that decision, but I didn't really have anyone nearby to share in that excitement. So I feel like the open mic scene definitely delivered that for us.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing of like deciding you're a songwriter, but then
no one.
Then you have to sort of wait for songwriting to decide that you're worthy of that title.
Yeah. There's also that element that we don't realize at the beginning. Well, that leads into my next question. Was there a song, an artist, or a moment that inspired you to become a songwriter? Because I know your mum was a music journalist.
She was, yeah.
So you were exposed to a lot of music growing up.
Yeah, lots. We'd get CDs through the post and put them on all throughout the day, and my mum would write reviews for them, and then lots of live reviews going to festivals, and then often just my mum and dad would go off and do exciting adventures like interview Bjork or Shane MacGowan up at his pub in Filthy McNasty's in Islington in London, and we were just kids, me and my sister. But when I was 14, she had tickets to review Bob Dylan at the Portsmouth Guildhall, and it was 2000, year 2000, so I was probably just turned 14, and I was in the press box watching the best. It was the best place to see Dylan, because the Guildhall was quite small. I've seen him many times since in sort of big cavernous arenas, and there was something very special about that time. It was the best tour, because I'm sure there was great tours, obviously the famous ones in the 60s and 70s, but this tour was the in between Time Out of Mind and Love and Theft. So it was just such a good band. Such like all the new stuff was fantastic, and then the versions of old songs were so interesting. And I didn't go in really. I didn't go in as a fan. As a 14-year-old growing up in England, I was very into Britpop and Oasis and Verve and Pulp and Lightning Seeds and that stuff. And so this was my parents' music really. But halfway through Tangled Up in Blue, I realised that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be on stage with just a semicircle of the best musicians around me in a beautiful theatre. And it's funny actually, because I saw Dylan in a little theatre, I've always been drawn to that's my version of big success. Because I didn't see him in an arena. I never pictured arenas. I always pictured a beautiful little theatre with everybody hanging on every word. Mm-hmm. And that's what I experienced back in 2000.
That's beautiful. So I guess probably at that age you started writing, but then, as I mentioned in your bio, you kind of built your following in Europe through busking on Portobello Road, which is not something that is as common here in North America. So for people who don't know about Portobello Road, can you tell us about Portobello Road and what would be your favorite memory from that time?
Oh, Portobello Road was magical. I'm sure lots of people have been on holiday there and go to London, go to Notting Hill, but Portobello Road is adjacent to where Bob Marley recorded Exodus and where Jimi Hendrix died, and where the Clash, Mick Jones from the Clash, lived at the top of the street near where George Orwell's house used to be, and Audrey Hepburn was discovered there, and the Sex Pistols signed their record contract to Virgin on just off the street there, and U2 were discovered at the Fla Festival under the Westway, and you had this melting pot of the Windrush generation from Jamaica and the Caribbean islands that had come over in the 50s. By the time the 70s roll around, they're really playing their music from back home and ingrained in the culture there. And at the top of the street, you got a lot of the old sort of Irish working class or British working class, and sort of like punk and reggae are all forming together up and down along this long, pretty straight street that has a bit of a hill in it, and so it's like music legends felt like that they were sort of formed there, and we would busk street perform with our backs to Mark Knopfler's house and opposite Claudia Schiffer's house, and we would play every Saturday for about 4 hours, and we did it for about 2 years, and so many. The memories of it was like we realised what was happening. It was when we realised how special it was incrementally. Like, first of all, we just wanted money to buy some beers that evening, and we would show up hungover. It'd be hard to get a space, and then once we had a bit of success where we were like, oh, this is amazing, we've made like £30, and I was like, well, let's get there a bit earlier next time, and let's be a little bit less hungover, and let's have all our strings on our guitars, and then by the end we took it really seriously, where we were out having fun every night, but Friday nights we all went to bed early because I had to be up really early on Saturday morning, because there was a man dressed like a robot who would try to take my spot outside Mark Knopfler's house. And if he took our spot, we were so loud. We had double bass, no amplification, but 4-part harmonies, and we'd have slide guitar and snare, and we'd all be singing, just like projecting as much as possible. So there was this one space outside Mark Knopfler's house was ideal, and everybody liked us around there. And then you just create this huge circle of people. There were tourists, but there was a lot of exchange students there, so a lot of 17, 18-year-old students from Germany and from Sweden and from Spain, and they took our CDs home with them. And it was back when sort of Facebook wasn't just populated by your grandparents, and it was, people would reach out to us and say, can you come to Italy to play in my little town, and can you come to Norway to play here, and it was an incredible street that gave me everything, really.
Yeah. Had you not done that, you probably would have had a completely different career.
Well, yeah, I think no career would have been more accurate.
Yeah.
No career would be more accurate. You know, there's no funding options really in the UK. There's no, I don't know what we would have done.
Yeah, because we talk about that quite a bit, because as a Canadian, we occasionally will have grant support to help with our touring, to help with records, but I do think sometimes Canadian artists can fall into this pit where they're relying on the grant and they're not actually trying to find realistic sources of income. And so I feel like for my American songwriter friends and anyone that lives internationally, you're kind of forced to learn to make people hear you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're forced to sing louder than you can because you need money to eat that night.
Yeah. I think creatively it's really good to have your back against the wall, to think like, okay, that hasn't worked. And even down to the songs, it was very quick. You know, when you have to make some money, whether for rent or for paying for, you know, the next recording session or all the beers you're going to have that night, you're looking at the reaction for the songs. You play a song and you make no money, you're like, well, that's the answer. You play a song, or that's the answer in that environment, in that context. I understand that, like, it doesn't really reward dynamics, that environment, but you play some other songs where the street would stop and fall in on you, and you're like, oh, well, that's the answer.
Works.
There, that works. So I definitely think that, you know, well, yeah, as you said, we've had this conversation a lot about grant systems, and I believe that there's definitely a very important place for it, especially in art that is really worthwhile and important for society, but might not necessarily sustain itself. So somebody playing something a bit more niche or unusual or historical or something like that. But I think if you're just doing a simple song played on a guitar, you have to kind of live and die by that, and accept if it wasn't good enough, and then pursue what was good enough. And if when there's no safety net, you get to those conclusions a lot quicker.
Today, it's a celebratory day because you are my first podcast guest, but it's also a celebration because we both have songs coming out today. Yours actually is out.
Yes, it's out in Europe.
It's out in Europe, but
now.
Tonight
Yeah.
It's officially available everywhere. Can you tell us about this new song? It's called Wicklow.
Wicklow, yeah. Wicklow is it's a town about an hour south of Dublin. I wanted something that felt a little bit like Simple Twist of Fate. So I'd had a scenario where I'd met up with kind of my first girlfriend who I'd written a lot of songs about. I hadn't seen her in a long time. And we went for a long walk through London and reconnected and sort of caught up on 10 years. And I said to her, we haven't seen each other since we were basically kids, and we, were teenagers when we were dating. And if you could go back to any point of that time, where would you go? And, we had lots of interesting memories, lots of places. And I was just surprised that she said Wicklow, where we'd gone on holiday when she was only 17 and I was 18. And I kind of pictured in that moment everything that meant. So the first half of the song sort of details the journey through London, and the second half details the memory of when she says Wicklow in one word, what actually Wicklow means. And it's a little fishing town, and just lots of sort of happy and quite wild memories of my time in Wicklow. So I put it all into that second half of the song.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And I believe you're going to be performing this song for us later on.
I shall.
Yes. And so the Wicklow comes out tonight. It's beautiful, and I encourage everyone to listen to it. We also have a song coming out called St. Hubert's Eve.
We do, yes.
St. Hubert's Eve is really a song about my great uncle Hubert. And so about a year and a half ago, we were writing on Zoom. I was telling you the story about my great uncle Hubert. He passed in a very tragic hunting accident, and I had my hands on an actual written account of the day from a parish priest. So that's really where St. Hubert's comes from. But from that document, what was most inspirational to you from that document?
Well, it's funny because the way you started our writing session that day was, I have an idea for a song that I can only write with you.
It could only be you.
And it was funny because, yeah, you had the document, and I think sort of as we did the research on it afterwards that that Father Conway at the time was a deacon, and he'd hiked out into the wilderness where your great uncle had died in a tragic hunting accident, and his description of the day, the way he described it was so humble and measured, and had such like a deft literary touch that it was incredible. It was like, as you read it, I could see the song. It was just a case of condensing it, and probably
There's so much imagery.
There's so much imagery, and it was so fascinating. It's probably a similar experience to what happens when somebody tries to put a book into a screenplay.
Yeah.
Because, there's stuff we left out that was interesting.
Oh, so much. I was rereading it last night, and I'm like, number one, it's so strange that we have this written account.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah.
Because I was trying to think why the deacon would have written the account. I presumed it was to give as an official statement, or to...
Maybe. But it seemed so descriptive and poetic.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it was for, because they would have had to have an inquest or something, but there was so much about Canada and the landscape. There's a really beautiful part, if I remember correctly, where his shoes are like falling apart as he's trudging through the undergrowth, and one of your uncles takes off his like hunting boots, or
it's my grandpa.
Your granddad.
My grandpa must have been like early 20s, maybe even a teenager still.
And
then.
the deacon was so like, again, very humble about saying like, these are wilderness men. These are like hunting
He-men.
Yeah, hunting men, and but also it was the determination and the faith of the realization probably that your great uncle couldn't be saved, but they might have time to find a priest, to deliver the last rites, or the sacrament of the sick, as it's also known, one of the sacraments. And there's a card. Actually, my dad has the card in his wallet that says, "I'm a Catholic. In case of emergency, get a priest."
Okay, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they knew, like your uncles knew that it was like, this emergency. This is not. You don't get. It's too late for a doctor, but there's just time for a priest. And so he described in great detail the journey out there, and then what he saw with your uncles kneeling around their dying brother, and he delivers the last rites, and then but the description is so beautiful, and it's very much like an internal monologue as well. He's really thinking about faith, loss of faith, depth of character, love, sacrifice, everything in his mind. So it's like, well, he'd done all the work as a songwriter. It's like, well, he has the descriptions, he has the conclusions, he has all these beautiful lines that he's drawing between these aspects. And as I was reading that, I was almost, as you were reading it, I was almost expecting this, but it didn't happen, that he might mention the patron saint of hunters. And the patron saint of hunters is St. Hubert, or St. Hubertus. And the famous story of St. Hubert was, he was about to pull a bow and arrow at a stag, and he saw the cross in between the stag's antlers, and he converted, and then converted the Franks. So you see that on the Jägermeister symbol, the antlers.
Oh, yes.
with the
I
cross.
remember when in our Zoom session you looked across the room to the Jägermeister bottle, and I think that's what reminded you of St. Hubert.
Yeah.
And so that was number one. I've never written a song from a historical account, or I've never really written a song about something as tragic as that's happened to my family line. But But that was a really spooky moment for us, is that we realized that the day before his death was St. Hubert's Eve.
Mm-hmm.
My uncle's name is Hubert.
The feast day,
And
yeah. Well, that was the kind of the most chilling, or not chilling, but like kind of, I don't know, how to describe it. The most special moment was, I said the patron saint of hunters is St. Hubert before I knew what his name was.
Oh yeah, I hadn't told you.
And you took a second. You kind of said his name was Hubert.
Chills.
I know.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, St. Hubert's feast day is the start of November, and you said that's when the accident happened, and so
that's where St. Hubert's
that's
Eve
where St.
comes
Hubert's
from.
Eve comes from, drawing those lines, and I love drawing parallels within songwriting, again, which is what the account did so well.
So Ryan and I have been writing together for a very long time, and I think you coined this term, but I lovingly refer to you as the grief vulture, because whenever I'm going through a breakup, or if a boy has hurt my heart, you tend to extract the best lyrics from me at those times. And so that's what gave birth to our song Start With Sorry. And I think this is one of your first trips to LA was where we wrote this.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your favorite part about Start With Sorry?
Well, I do like, I mean, it can be so dull when your friends who are songwriters are in happy relationships.
Oh, it's the worst.
It's the worst. So anytime you're like, oh, I'm in a terrible situation, he's left me, I've left him, whatever, I was like, brilliant, that's fantastic.
Tell me everything.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear, because now we can get back to business and start writing again. Start with Sorry. You'd had the idea, somebody had texted you where it had been left badly, and you felt that it was too much of a casual reintroduction into your life, and that you'd moved away, moved on, and I think you'd only received that text like not long before, so you'd had.
Well, it was the day of my album release. I feel like in many songs, I don't really own my anger, and so Start With Sorry was me really deciding that someone didn't really have the privilege of being in my life, and that it's actually a new boundary for me that, someone should start with sorry before just casually re-entering your life.
And I was very up for stoking your newfound passion for
anger?
holding anger and resentment. So
Okay.
So I enjoyed doing that, and
Good.
I made you swear in the song as well.
Oh yes, I've never
sworn in a song.
Never before.
So now you have to put explicit on that. So you'll be up.
The whole album.
You'll be up there with the rappers and everything.
Oh yeah. In fact, that really sparked the fire in me. So every single song has swear words now.
You're just swearing non-stop.
Yeah.
Swearing like a sailor on shore leave. Yeah. But it was. Yeah, it was very descriptive of your new life in LA, and then
specifically Highland Park.
Yeah, and then and thinking about Toronto, and was create that sort of distance, and then the memories of your relationship together. The song came pretty quickly once we got going, but then we recorded it in quite a unusual way.
Oh yes, yeah, it was with Liam.
Yeah, because you weren't in the room for the recordings of the instruments.
No.
Yeah, and neither was I.
None of you.
No, because I was in Gran Canaria doing my Irish and Bob Dylan show.
Oh, yes.
And so Liam Blomqvist and Anna Fafakova, they...
Amazing producers.
In Berlin that I work with a lot, and I trusted them to sort of work with it. And it was like a ballad. Our friend Christopher Moynihan had played it on piano up at his place.
Oh, yes.
And it was very ballady. It kind of was like, oh, is this... the route that this song goes down? Is this a piano ballad?
It's one of those songs I didn't really expect. I feel like it could have easily been on my previous album. It was sort of the final chapter, the final time of me writing a song about that person. And I don't know if you experienced that with some of your songs, or we obviously have muses that we write about, and I sometimes feel like they have a shelf life of how long we write about them.
Yeah, there's that thing, that sort of Rumpelstiltskin thing, and it's in a lot of folk tales and fairy tales, that if you name the person, then they disappear.
Okay.
So I tried to do that in a song. I would like finally say, okay, this is the final song, and this song has their name. And once I've named, there's nowhere to go after that.
The final nail in the coffin.
Yeah, exactly. Because you've named them then, and then the curse is lifted a little bit. But
that leads into my next question, because I know that you actually you're kind of a mentor to songwriters in Berlin. There's certain students, so I know the answer to this. But what is your advice to young songwriters?
Oh, yeah. Just go out and get wasted and apply for as many grants as you can. No.
Wait a second. That's not what you said the other day.
Writers read.
That's it.
It gets it's a thing now that my dad always said to me, you should never be at a loss for words when someone says, what book are you currently reading? Especially if your job is writing. So that was, I kind of said it offhand in one of the workshops that we do in the studio in LA Recordings. We have the workshops with BIM, the BIM University, British and Irish Modern Music University, but there's a campus in Berlin. And I said to them, like, if you want to, you're writing songs in English. That was the course we were doing, was lyric writing in English, and you should be reading. You should be reading. Go to the English bookshop on Warschaustrasse and buy Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh, or Jane Eyre, or Confederacy of Dances, or Master and Margarita, or something that's going to like spark your brain for a few hours before you start writing.
Mm-hmm. I think it's very smart. And on the way here, we were listening to Bob Dylan. And I think you said for some of your students, you played Bob Dylan for them, and that was the first time they'd heard him.
Yeah, for a lot of them. I mean, for that course in particular, a lot of the students are Scandinavian or Eastern European, and they're coming to Berlin, but they're wanting to write various forms of music, but in English. So a lot of the workshop that I've been doing with them is helping them to understand that it's the details really matter. So you get a lot of details you understand details better if you're reading a lot and reading poetry, because the knee-jerk reaction for new songwriters is they want to just tell people how they feel. Mm-hmm. But you have to earn it. You have to earn the right to tell someone how you feel, and that's the journey that you take them on through the verses, through a pre-chorus, and then by the chorus you can say like, and this is how I feel. Mm. So I'd play them certain songs, and I'd get them to look for the details. And the details, there's different types of details. Conversation is a detail, time of day, movement, like are you on a train, are you on all these little details. So I played them Tangled Up in Blue by Bob Dylan. I was playing them Kyoto by Phoebe Bridgers, or Poison Oak by Bright Eyes, and at the end of it, like a school teacher, I'd say, okay, what details were in that song? Mm-hmm. Not how they feel, but the journey that they took you on, and how they populated that with the things that were happening.
Mm-hmm. That's good job.
Thanks. If you're listening, BIM Institute, I would like more workshops, please.
Yes, please hire Ryan.
Yeah.
Okay, well, after this LA chapter, you're flying to Japan. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us, why are you going to Japan?
Back to do my Irish concert and Bob Dylan concert. So I'll be back to my little theatre, do that for 3 months, and then I'll be back in Europe. I have a residency on a little island just off the coast of the Netherlands called Borkum. It's a German island. And then back in the studio in Berlin by July. Oh, and I'm writing in July with a band I've been co-writing with in Germany called Amistad. So we're going to the Alps in Austria to do some writing with them, and that's always a very fun experience. And I have a song with Amistad out today as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
Called Still Believe. So.
Your life sounds like a storybook. Well, my final question for you, Ryan, is what to you, as a musician who is 37, Am I allowed to say your age?
Yeah, of course.
I'm also 37, and we're proud. Yeah, whatever.
You're wearing it better than I am, but yeah.
Well, at this age, at this time in your life, I would say you're married to music. There's no other profession that you want to pursue, and I would say the same about myself. There's nothing that brings you more joy than writing a good song, and you hunt for good songs. But what is success to you? And in 5 to 10 years, what do you hope that looks like?
I think it looks like I have a good friend that said that you spend your 20s or your early part of your development as an adult learning how to do this, learning how to, and then one day or over maybe a brief period of time, and that for me was probably the pandemic, as it was for a lot of people, you realize you just have to start implementing all the things you learnt, that there isn't the time for the kind of meandering adventures. It's time to really start reaping what you've sown. And so I think it's just getting better at all the things that I'm doing now. Like I'm really enjoying touring again. I think maybe even 2019, before the pandemic, it felt like things were slowing down a bit. But the last tour was one of my favourite tours I've done in a long time, with an Italian guitar player, and Andrea Vitozzi, and we had a wonderful tour with lots of full rooms, and like I would just like to do that, but constantly be improving, constantly. You want to play to more people, of course, and you want to play nice places, and you want the shows to be better, but also artistically taking chances, and writing more, and just keep putting out good music. That's it.
That sounds nice. I would also like to do that.
Would you like to do that? Well, let's do that together then.
High five. Okay, well, thank you, Ryan, for being my first podcast guest.
Thank you for inviting me.
We are going to end our little session with a song, and this you can listen to Ryan's music on every streaming platform, and hurrah.
Hurrah.
Okay.
It was raining as I left Brighton, but the sky cleared as I crossed the Thames, on the way to the eye of the storm of my heart. And I hadn't seen her once since then. I heard her voice in a swirl of strangers. She wore cowboy boots and a scarf round her neck. She hesitates as I go to embrace her, as if even now her heart she must protect. We walked for hours through the veins of the city, and once or twice there were tears in her eyes. We sat on a bench with her head on my shoulder, watched the street lights turn on against the darkening sky. And even then my mind was drawn to the past, as the present was slipping from my hands so fast. After a silence I asked, 'cause I wanted to know. I said, if you could go back, my love, where would you go? You said to the fires and the songs on the beach, the storms in the harbor, the wood that we stole in the shadow of the castle, the waves on the shore, with the nights never ending. There's always one more, telling stories in darkness, laughing too loud in the little town of which you're always so proud. The moments we shared such a long time ago. If I could go back, that's where I'd go. One summer with you in Wicklow.
That was Ryan O'Reilly with Wicklow. Thank you for tuning in to Fairy Pod Mother. Thank you, Ryan, for being my first ever guest.
I'm your first Fairy Pod son.
Oh, interesting. I like that.
Yeah, I thought
You're my first pod son. Okay, well, until next time, everyone, have a great day.